disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Faro.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Good evening, I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. Ukrainian troops have been greeted by residents celebrating in the key city of Kherson after Putin's soldiers were ordered to retreat. The withdrawal marked the third major Russian retreat of the war. Crowds cheered and chanted glory to the Ukrainian armed forces as President Zelensky called it an historic day. It comes after a main bridge over the Dnipro River on the west of the city was destroyed before Russian forces moved out. A number of Russian soldiers drowned in the river when trying to escape. UK authorities and coastguards are preparing for a significant surge in small boats crossing the English Channel this weekend. Bad weather has stopped migrants from illegally reaching the coast for almost a fortnight. But GB News understands, with the weather expected to improve, crime groups from Albania are planning a mass launch of small boats from French beaches tomorrow. It would be the first large-scale arrival since the end of last month, when just over 14,000 people arrived in 32 small boats. The UK's economy has shrunk in what experts warn could be the beginning of the longest recession since records began. It contracted by 0.2% during those 3 months as the cost of living crisis deepened. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt is warning there's a tough road ahead, adding difficult decisions will be needed to restore confidence and economic stability, but that the British economy remains resilient. US President Joe Biden has called on all countries to act faster on climate change. Speaking at the COP27 climate summit in Egypt earlier today, Biden said he's treating the climate crisis with urgency, adding the US will meet emission reduction targets by 2030. He also said the war in Ukraine has made it more urgent than ever to double down on climate commitments. World leaders have scrapped the so-called family photo for their upcoming G20 summit. They refused to be pictured alongside Putin or his representatives after unanimously condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The photo is typically taken in a display of power and unity. Putin has already confirmed that he'll skip the meeting altogether to avoid confrontation. And the UK marked Armistice Day with a 2-minute silence this morning. bells rang out across the country, including the recently restored Big Ben in London, ahead 2 minutes silence to remember the war dead. A service was held at the National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire to pay tribute to all those who've served their country. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now it's over to headliners.
I'm Mark Dolan, and this is Headliners, your first look at tomorrow's papers. As always, in the company of two fantastic comedians. This evening, Simon Fanshawe, OBE, and Jonathan Cogan, STD. But he has used a cream. Let's take a look at tomorrow's front pages, and we start with the Daily Mail. Woke stunt row over Met terror chief's hot flush vest. The Daily Telegraph, Met warns strikes will hurt the war on crime, and Britain and France reach deal on migrants. The Guardian, staff offered route out amid concerns over Dominic Raab's behaviour. FT, crypto world rocked by the fall of the FTX empire. The Mirror, sorry's not enough. A contestant berates Matt Hancock in the jungle. The Times, care homes told to stop shutting out loved ones. The Daily Express, US presence in France to stop crossings is a deal in the offing to end the boat crossings in the Channel. And last but not least, the Daily Star, I wouldn't touch Wally if I won him in a raffle. Shamed Britain's Got Talent star fights for his career. David Walliams in hot water. And those are your front pages. And Jonathan Cogan, let's start with the front page of Saturday's Daily Mail.
Yes, this is a bit of a rollercoaster here. So, woke stunt row over Met terror chief's hot flush vest. Sounds like a weird little tongue twister there. So, Britain's anti-terror chief has been accused of a woke stunt after he donned a special jacket that simulates menopausal hot flushes at Scotland Yard. So, the Assistant Commissioner, Matt Jukes, who is the Met Police's new he-for-she gender equality lead, he wore it's called a Menavest, and he wore it in a meeting to mark Menopause Awareness Month. And if you live with my mum, every month was Menopause Awareness Month. But he said he found the vest with heated pads at times uncomfortable and at times distracting. He said the heat when he wore it came in waves, and he had a feeling of, oh no, not now, and an anticipation before really losing my train of thought. So yeah, that's mum all over.
Does he find terrorism uncomfortable as well?
I think that's less of a problem for him now, because he hasn't worked out how to take the vest off, so it's sort of fused on like a terrible, terrible curse. But is it a good use of resources?
Simon Fanshawe, you have to worry that they're not focused on the job at hand, which is to stop Brits being blown up.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough, but these are two separate stories. There's nothing that wearing a man vest that gives you the experience of what women actually go through during menopause, notwithstanding that you've experienced it second-hand.
Of course.
Do you live with your mum?
No, not anymore.
Okay.
Not after it got so bad.
I suddenly thought, oh, my God. No, these are two separate things. Look, it's perfectly sensible. Men should understand what women go through in the menopause. Men should understand what women go through living with them. They should have to live with an avatar of their own and put up with their own behaviour, and we should be made to simulate childbirth.
Of ourselves?
These are good things.
I love that.
Yes, these are good things that actually poor women have to put up with. I don't, by the way. I mean, when it comes to all this, don't get involved. But
well,
so I think actually this is a good thing.
Yeah, you're wonderfully house-trained, aren't you?
I'm very right, but the point is
you're not a typical bloke. You're a bit more refined than that.
Well, I was going to say, I think I'm incredibly typical of a certain class of bloke, if we're going to go there. But it's the same as spending a day in a wheelchair. This is good experiential stuff, and it's fun, and it doesn't stop you tackling terrorism. There is a deep, deep problem in the Met. And there is a deep, deep problem. They're not paying attention to crime. So what they are doing is all the other stuff, which is kind of, pottering around people's houses and saying you shouldn't tweet this, that or the other. Stop doing that, wear the vest, that's fine, and tackle the terrorism.
I think you're being a little too forgiving, though, because the messaging on this is not great, given the fact that taxpayers want to see their hard-earned money going into the prevention of attacks from those who wish us ill.
Yeah, but you can prevent attacks while you're wearing a man vest.
But it doesn't scream that they're focused on the fact that Britain faces an unprecedented terror threat. Do you not think our enemies are laughing at this?
No, I don't think it matters at all. I think this is an experiential thing, and I think the Daily Mail's blowing it up. They're absolutely right that actually the Met is doing really badly and isn't concentrating on
Do you
burglaries.
think Al Qaeda will attack Britain when they've calculated that the Met terror chief is having his time of the month?
I don't think they'll pay any attention to it at all. But
He's on the blob in October the 3rd. That's when we dropped the bomb.
They won't pay any attention to it at all. Experiential stuff is a good thing to do. Empathy is a good thing to gather. But as long as it doesn't stop you doing other things, what they should be doing is then, with the vest on, in the wheelchair, solving the crime.
Oh, my goodness, the world's gone mad. Well, speaking of which, let's have a look at The Guardian now, Simon. What are some of the key stories on the front page of The Guardian?
Well, this one, front page, as you said, was the MOJ, that's the Ministry of Justice, the staff have been offered a route out amid concerns over Dominic Raab's behaviour. You may remember that Dominic Raab was indeed the head of the Ministry of Justice between September 21 and September 22. He was then sacked. He's now got his job back again because, of course, if you get that many prime ministers that swiftly, it's a bit of, it turns out the minister...
And he knows where the photocopier is.
Well, the ministerial career turns out to be indeed a revolving door, so that's very good. Yeah. But the thing about it is that he behaved so badly, it is alleged, last time that he was there.
Be careful, he's a lawyer.
And what they did was they gathered a load of the senior staff in and said to them, what's its back? Do you want another job? You could move to another ministry if you don't mind. And then people burst into tears, and some of them said, actually, we'll do that, thank you very much. Oh. And the permanent secretary apparently had to take him in and say, look, this is a bad idea. But the thing that's interesting about it, I suppose, is that you've got Sunak saying, his quote was, he promised a government, in contrast to that of his two predecessors, that would have integrity, professionalism and accountability at every level. So he's had Gavin Williamson now being looked into for all sorts of bad language and bad behaviour. Now Dominic Raab's being looked into for bad behaviour and bad language. You'll remember back to Priti Patel was not exactly living up to the pretty bit of her name. And so it goes on. So you do begin to wonder about the sort of entitlement of these people who are stomping around these ministries, because that's how they think of it. They think the civil service is a kind of blob that's designed to stop them doing anything.
What the public think as well.
Well, the public are wrong. The point is that most stuff in government functions reasonably well. Lots of it functions very, very badly. But it's a huge organisation. But what you don't do to get it functioning well is wandering around the place, stomping and screaming at people. That is not good management.
Well, the first thing you've got to do is get them back to the office, because most of them are still working from home. But, Jonathan, don't you think that a tough boss like Dominic Raab is normally a good boss?
It depends what you mean by tough. If it's just somebody who wants to see results and isn't, doesn't mince their words, then I think it certainly can be. I think you can motivate people that way. If it gets to the point where it's abusive and creates a toxic work environment, then I would say not. So, I don't know...
Well, then you better leave GBNews.
Yeah. I've already
You've come to the wrong place, baby.
I've already had a coffee thrown in my face today. Yeah.
Have you? Who by?
I spilt it. I couldn't use the machine.
Yeah, you were putting up with your own behaviour.
But I think it was passive-aggressive by me, but yeah. They call me the Raab of GB. But yeah, no...
It was either Neil Oliver or I don't know, Nigel Farage. Trying to work it out. It's like a whodunit.
Exactly.
But I mean, what do you think about that? The principle that these ministers, the cabinet ministers, are under a lot of pressure to deliver for the public, Simon. Yeah. And you must have had tough bosses who don't mince their words.
Yeah, but that's not... Tough bosses doesn't mean shouting and screaming at people. Good management, the way you get people to do things is you inspire them, you give them a common purpose, and you work out what inspires different people, and you work on that. That's how... The last time he was there, he failed to sort the barristers' strike. The court backlog grew exponentially while he was there. He's not a good boss. He's a bloke who likes to shout his mouth off, according to the report.
What if the blob, as they've been dubbed in the press, the civil service, are resisting the government's Rwanda plan?
They aren't resisting
there was a notice board in the Home Office saying, we welcome everybody, and it was a direct criticism of the Rwanda plan, which is government policy.
There's a real
you can love it or hate it, but they were elected to do it.
There's a real difference between expressing your view about a policy and whether or not you crack on and implement it.
I can't imagine those civil servants very enthusiastic about implementing a policy that there's an advert that says it's bad. In the Home Office itself, on the notice board.
You're just a sort of Jenga game of bigotry, really, aren't you?
Never.
I mean, of prejudice.
Just offering you some much-needed resistance for your dogma.
Every civil servant that I have ever known, and I've, lots of friends who worked in they just buy it. They go, if you've got a Labour government, this is what you do. If you've got a Tory government, that is the job. You get on with it. Whatever you might feel, and of course you express those feelings, this is a lousy policy, but you're still there to implement it.
OK, all right. Well, look, let's have a look now, Jonathan, at the Times newspaper, and what do they have?
Yeah, I found the story quite upsetting, actually. So, care homes told to stop shutting out loved ones. Now, I didn't know this was still going on. This is very infuriating. So hundreds of care homes still refuse to accept visitors, even though restrictions in England were dropped in the spring. So these are still the COVID restrictions that are being implemented, even though there's now no government requirement for them. And these are stopping old people and vulnerable people from having their friends and family visiting them, which I think is disgusting. I think it's absolutely disgusting. These are people who... The care homes aren't there to keep people alive indefinitely in some sterile situation just forever. The point is to provide quality of life, and having visits from your relatives and friends and all kinds of people is what gives you that quality. And to deny people that, I think, is inhumane and barbaric. And I don't normally get annoyed, but I am annoyed.
Well, you're right too. I think they didn't get the memo that the pandemic has changed and that it's time now to move on, because actually the care homes, many would argue, has been one of the scandals of the pandemic, Simon.
The trouble for care homes and with care homes, as like everything else, I mean, it does say halfway through the article that the minister acknowledged the vast majority of places are now allowing visits. So this is definitely a smaller group of people. But there are great care homes and there are terrible care homes. And the ones that are terrible, as Jonathan is saying, are almost criminally terrible. I mean, they're giving people... They're not even giving people a quality of life. They're taking quality of life away from people as they get older. But the other side of this, of course, is that they're not properly supported and regulated. They're not properly invested. I mean, it is impossible to hang on to care home staff because they get paid threepence halfpenny. So they move. You can earn more on the till at Asda than you can in a care home. So part of the problem is that you've got incredibly substandard care in lots of places because you get this huge turnover and so it goes on. So I think there's a kind of context to this, but I think the minister's doing the right thing. If you're going to say the ones who aren't doing it, as long as she doesn't make a bogeyman of all care homes, because actually some of them are great.
Some of them are great, absolutely right. And
the people who do it. I remember, did you see on the Repair Shop? Was it the Repair Shop? One of those programmes, they built a pergola. The staff, they built a pergola for the staff.
That's amazing. That's
because
wonderful.
These staff had moved into the care home during the pandemic.
Before we get to our next story, do you think, Simon and Jonathan, that it was a mistake to fire care home workers for not having the jab during the pandemic?
Yep.
Simon, what do you think about that? Because, I mean, this is the legacy of much of the pressure that's now on the care sector, isn't it? They are minus 40k employees.
I think it's so difficult. Look, if you're a doctor, there are jabs that you have to have in order to perform surgery, and that's to do with maintaining your infection barriers and so on and so forth. So there's a bit of me that says, actually, if that is going to prevent death of the people in the care home, actually, this is a good thing. On the other hand, I understand that people have arguments about their freedom of choice. And to be honest, every time I think about this issue, I get round.
I think that's very honest. Yeah, if only everyone was that nuanced. It's not black and white, is it? Let's have a look now at the Mirror, Simon. And this is a pretty black and white story. Matt Hancock, basically in the doo-doo.
I love to be the queen of nuance. That's me. So this is Matt Hancock, who, let's face it, has got the most appropriate surname, as we find out day after day, week after week. So you remember that he's gone into the jungle, and so the headline is, Charlene White confronts Matt Hancock over COVID rule-breaking after losing aunt to virus. So Matt Hancock, you will remember, was Minister of Health during the virus, or at least one of them, and Charlene White is a television person, I understand.
Yep.
And she is in there, and what she did was she took him on because she said to him, look, you broke the rules, you broke the law. And he gave this classic answer. I didn't break any laws, he said. Guidance is different, and that's the thing. Do you remember at school?
His own guidance?
Yes, his own guidance, as it turns out. But you remember that thing at school when somebody stole your pencil and you said, oh, that's mine. They went, oh, I didn't know it was yours.
Yeah, that's right.
Sorry, I'm afraid that's a loophole.
They told me, they said, what are you going to do about it? And I'm like, well, nothing.
Ignorance of the law is no defence.
But, I mean, it's just pathetic saying, we just broke the guidance, they broke the laws.
Also, it didn't feel like guidance at the time, did it?
Well, also, it didn't feel like guidance. But, when he kissed Gina Coladangelo, who is his mistress, he didn't just break the guidance. Turned out he broke his marriage vows.
Well, he broke the hymen, didn't he?
So in lots of... not going there. But in lots of different
Family
ways...
show. Can you please, Jonathan, behave?
I think that I think he's an idiot. I find it incredible. I'm going to sound like, hump for hump. I'm like a kettle on the Arga now.
That's all right.
I find it unbelievable that he's a serving MP. And he takes however many weeks off, and 400 grand, it's said he's being told, to go into the jungle on a television programme.
Oh,
sorry, love, you should be doing your job.
Well, I think what you do is you resign your seat, you provoke a by-election, and then you go into the jungle.
Hello. I think that's right.
What you don't do is go in as a serving member of Parliament. It makes a mockery of the office.
Well, I hear Rishi Sunak's going on the Crystal Maze next week, so I don't know what.
Let's hope he gets lost and stays there.
Yes, Liz Truss on I'm a Celebrity, Keep Me.
There you go. Oh, my God. Why don't we put all of the cabinet onto reality TV? Surely that would be more entertaining.
It basically is, yeah.
Yeah, we're getting there. Well, Jonathan, take us through the front page of the FT, which I know is your go-to newspaper these days.
I'm the economics guy at GB, that's for sure. So FTX, a major crypto exchange, goes bankrupt as Bitcoin prices collapse. Or I should say, crypto world rocked by fall of FTX empire. Now, basically what's happened is that crypto has, especially Bitcoin and other high-profile coins, have not been doing particularly well of lately. There's been quite a severe drop-off. And one of the main exchanges has basically gone under. So the crypto exchange FTX has gone bankrupt, and its high-profile chief executive, Sam Bankman-Fried, which is a great name for a money man, under the cosh, he's resigned amid major troubles at the company. So the news sent the price of cryptocurrencies plunging. Bitcoin, the largest digital currency, fell almost 3% in the wake of the announcement, leaving it down more than 20% over the last week. So it's basically been a very tumultuous time in the crypto markets, and this huge company's kind of gone under now.
Yeah, Simon, apologies in advance. I didn't know if you were aware of this, but GB News pay in crypto coins, so...
Look, love, I had problems when they went decimal. That confused me, and I was only a child. And now, it took me ages, the idea... I remember standing in a queue once thinking, that's students pay for a cup of coffee with a card. How ridiculous. Now, of course, card. Takes me a long time to catch up. So the idea... I have no idea what cryptocurrency is, and I think that's proved. But I think he should change his name, actually, to Sam Bankrupt-Man-Fried. Nice. But it's led to personal issues for Mr. Bankrupt-Man-Fried, whose $16 billion in net wealth fell to zero in a matter of days. I just think that tells you about cryptocurrency, doesn't it? How is anybody who's only been in business for 30 seconds be worth 16 billion net worth?
Yeah.
Well, it's nonsense, isn't it?
There's that saying that...
It's a sea bubble.
They say when you break up with someone acrimoniously, they say better to have loved and then lost than to have never loved at all. There's nothing worse than having been rich and then not being rich anymore.
I dropped a fiver the other day, and that was very sad. Imagine how he feels.
Yeah, well...
But the thing is with that 60 billion, do you think he actually had it to spend? I mean, this idea of net worth, it's like Elon Musk, Half it's based on share price, isn't it? And cryptocurrency, if it's based on cryptocurrency, well, I'm not surprised he's worth nothing.
You'd hope that he at least went to Heels and bought a posh sofa.
Is that your idea? That's your idea of being very rich?
That's when you've made it.
God, how middle class.
That's the gift.
The rest of us are dreaming about, private jets to Rome and apartments looking over the Vatican. You think, like a nice sofa from Heels.
Definitely. Little coffee table.
over here.
Sign me up. Absolutely. Drinks cabinet. That's what I'm all about. Home
Laura
furnishings.
Ashley, that's my idea of style.
Well, now you're talking. Well, that's it for part one. But join us after the break for torpedoes, more pedos, poppies and cryptos, which sounds like a dodgy Afghan hotel. See you in 3.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online. Across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GBNews.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something weird happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak. Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for The Briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, The Briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
I'm Mark Dolan, and this is Headliners, your first look at tomorrow's papers. Tonight, in the company of the brilliant Jonathan Cogan and Simon Fanshawe. Now, we get back to the big stories of the day from tomorrow's papers, and Saturday's Mirror now, and there are 800,000 paedophiles on the loose. Jonathan.
I'm scared. I've got a young-looking face. This doesn't sound good. So Britain has up to 800,000 paedophiles who pose a risk to children, warned Top Cop. So the UK has between 500,000 and 800,000 paedophiles who pose a sexual risk to children, according to the director of Britain's equivalent of the FBI, which is the National Crime Agency. And the issue continues to worsen. So this sounds very alarming. These are high numbers. If you think how many maybe there are 40 million adults in the UK, and this is 800,000. That's like 1 in 40 people are, and I'm suspicious of every adult I meet. Now, that's a very distressing number. It's high and it's scary. So Chris Fairmont, who's the director for the child sex abuse threat, he warned that the huge scale of the problem means police will never be able to catch them all, like some kind of sinister Pokemon. That sounds terrible.
It is. It's deeply troubling, isn't it, Simon, that we have these offenders amongst us.
I think the thing that's really scary about this story is that, and it says in the story that, and this guy Fairmont says, it might be a common view that sex offenders are all on the dark web, but that's just not the case. And the illustration is this guy who frighteningly lives in Brighton. Immediately, that's his name. But anyway, this guy posed as a teenage boy. He's 26 years old. He posed as a teenage boy on just ordinary chat platforms and various things. He messaged more than 5,000 people on one platform. So this is a kind of, it's like a net, trawler.
Yeah.
Net sort of
To be fair, that was my tactic on Tinder when I was on back in the day.
Quite clearly there, you got a sore wrist from flicking to the right.
Yes,
you?
exactly. Yeah.
So, but the thing is
that's his story.
Hello. I think the joke was there. I don't think it needed that. I don't think it needed the highlighter, did it?
It was gilding the lily.
It was just there. Well, OK. But the point about this is that he's finally been sentenced, this guy. But, I mean, he would go on and on and on and on and on, and then he'd trap these girls, teenage girls, and then he'd just harass them and threaten them. And these poor kids, once they've done it, of course, it's incredibly difficult then to say, oh, yeah, actually, I did, because then you'd sew it deep in. And I think that's the frightening thing, is that this is regular stuff. Sure. And I bet, too... Well, there's two kinds of things which are scary, is that there's this kind of sexual abuse of, teenagers and those kind of... And then there's then there's tiny children. You know, and they're two quite... You know, you get sex offenders, which is what this one is, and then you get paedophiles, and it's the combination of both. There's kind of two different kinds of things going on here. But as he rightly says, where child sex abusers are going to start is where they can find children. They'll find wherever.
Bouncy castle.
Bouncy castles. It was the Scouts when I was a kid, you know, all that kind of stuff. That's what you do. It's horrifying.
And there was one other point. I mean, I totally agree, but there's one other point in here. It said, Mr. Fairmond said that the online safety bill, which is going through Parliament, has been delayed several times, will be a huge help to police by forcing firms to report abuses, so they find it absolutely fine. But then he criticised tech firms for pushing for more privacy settings and end-to-end encryption. Now, I know I could be wrong, I might change my mind, but I think I'm pretty in favour of privacy for, you know, personal users using apps and stuff. You don't want the government looking in, but at the same time, you want to protect the most vulnerable people. So it's that toss-up between privacy and freedom, I suppose.
Indeed, a deeply chilling story. Let's talk about the NHS now. Saturday's Eye and the end is nigh. Simon.
Well, this story says doctors say NHS heading for privatisation as agency staff paid more to cover staff shortages. The privatisation thing is a sort of red herring. It's the Eye doing a thing. You've got to, you know, people say, oh, they're privatising the NHS. You've got to kind of make up your mind what you think that means. The point about the NHS is it's publicly owned and it's free at the point of delivery, except opticians and dentistry and prescriptions and various things like that. But it's by and large free.
A recent bum lift that I had as well.
Well, it's looking good, love, although you are sitting down. But the point is, privatisation would mean actually selling it off. I mean, there's lots of private providers that provide services, but they provide them free, so you can get hip replacements, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so let's forget the privatisation bit. The real story at the centre of this is that doctors are going and doing locums. Nurses are going into the agency rather than working for the NHS permanently for two reasons. One is you get more control over your life, get better life balance. And secondly, you can earn twice as much as a locum or a nurse on the agency. If you go into the bank, well, not the bank, because that's NHS, but if you go an agency nurse. So the problem is that the government is spending more and more and more money on agency nurses rather than, and as one of the sort of pandandrums in the NHS makes the point, that if they were to invest in doubling the number of doctors, trainee doctors, to 15,000, that would cost 1.8 billion. Currently, the agency spend is 3 billion. So the problem that lies behind this is that there's 10% of the 10% vacancies in the NHS, and it's all to do with that failure to keep competitive in the market, to pay people the thing, and to give them the kind of balance and sort of flexibility that other people get in their jobs. You know, it's perfectly possible. Lots of people do it. They work on flexible rotas, and I know I'm married to somebody who works in the NHS, and he doesn't really get any flexibility at all, you know, which I find a little bit shocking. So that's what lies behind it. It's this failure to recruit and retain and pay properly nurses and doctors.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think? Where do you stand in this debate, Jonathan? Is it about money or is it structural?
I think it's probably a combination of the two. So, I mean, your description struck a chord with me. I have a very close friend, and she's a doctor, and she works for A&E, and we never get to see her. She can never take time off. She doesn't know when she's going to get any time off. She works, overnight, and it's incredibly, takes such a toll on her. Obviously, she's opted into that. That's a job she's chosen to do, and she's going to work as well as she can on it. But I think it's probably a structural thing as well. Like, we need to incentivise the best people to come and work, but also make their conditions tolerable. But, yeah.
I don't know what the basis for this calculation is, so let's take it with slight pinch of salt, because it is the head of the co-chair of the BMA, and they are, after all, they are actually the doctors' trade union rather than a sort of medical. But he does say that doctors have seen their take-home pay cut by more than a quarter since 2008-9. I mean, that's staggering. I don't know the basis of the figure, but let's say it was 20%. Let's say it was 15%. That's still a hell of a dip.
Well, it is. Some are saying that actually nurses, doctors, frontline medical professionals should get a pay rise, but it should come from within the NHS budget, and there should be less investment in middle managers and those not connected to care.
Less bureaucracy. Sure.
Yeah, well, we work a lot. The business I have, we work a lot in the NHS, and I think you have to be careful about that because, you do want focused services. You need services to be well managed. And it's quite clear that it differs hospital to hospital. Great managers run great hospitals, and then doctors and nurses get the space to do what they need to do and the resources to do what they do. Bad managers don't.
Yeah.
And it's like every other business,
Comes down to the quality of the person in charge, how good they are at their job.
But if you're Dominic Raab, of course, according to you, he'd run a great hospital. Well, he'd run around the place shouting at everybody.
A bit of tough love. Well, look, next up in Saturday's Telegraph, poppy shaming is out of control. What's happened, Simon?
Oh, this is me again. Sorry about that. So, stop the poppy shaming, says Armed Forces Minister. This guy called James Heapy, I think is how you pronounce it. And he says, I don't approve of poppy shaming. People wear a poppy or they don't. The armed forces do what they do, irrespective. I really agree with him. I mean, I had this joke with the lovely sound guy here, because he said, when I was last on, he said, have you got a poppy to wear? And I went, I'll wear one if it's my choice, but I'm not going to wear one if you're going to make me.
Yeah.
And I was at a conference today, and we took the 2-minute silence. And it was rather lovely because the conference was in a room, and outside in the corridors, quite an old building in a university, was the University War Memorial. So what happened was that at 11:50, the bugle sounded. So we opened the conference doors, and the bugle sounded, and so on and so forth. So we kind of half put pace in that thing. And I discovered something about my dad. My dad was wounded in the war in a place called Sidi Barrani, which is about 3 hours west of Cairo. And he was very badly wounded. My sister told me the other day something I didn't realise. He was left for dead. And then they discovered him. Then they realised he was breathing, and so they rushed him in. And when he died of cancer years and years and years ago, his body shrunk. And bits of shrapnel came out.
Wow, so that was in him.
So it was in him. So I found myself today just thinking about that, really.
Well,
so I think that's great, and I think it's really important, and you hear endless amazing stories, soldiers on the front line. And I just think you should never wear a poppy to speak about yourself. Wear a poppy to speak about them.
Yeah, and God bless the memory of your dear old dad. Jonathan, you're the younger generation. Do you know young people that resent wearing a poppy or don't want to?
I mean, I'm sure there are a few. I think, as you say, it's got to be a choice. No one can make you do it. But I think it's such a simple thing to do. It's such a small gesture to, pay tribute to so many, heroic people who've died and been injured. So you don't have to do it, but also don't make a fuss about it. Just wear it if you want to, and I think it's a nice thing to do.
There you go. A breakout of common sense in the GB News Headliners studio. Let's go to the Daily Mail now, and it's all gone a bit sci-fi, Jonathan. What's happened?
Yeah, this is all very Death Star-y. It's kind of interesting. So Britain's first ever Star Wars-style laser death ray shoots down drone from more than 2 miles away. So Britain's first ever laser death ray, I thought we'd have one by now, which could one day be used to annihilate fighter jets, warships and hypersonic missiles, has scored its first kill. So this is like a scene from a science fiction movie. Basically, a laser has shot down a drone in a test. And it's a really very kind of terrifying, but also very cool laser that it's like pinpoint accuracy. It can shoot things down several miles away. It doesn't need any ammunition, and it's like super light. So you can basically move it around, as I understand it, and just shoot down stuff out the sky. Like, that's a pretty future. I think we're in the future now.
Well, yes, I'm already looking forward to the action figures.
Yes. Well, melting them or just the one that shoot it out?
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm sure that somehow George Lucas will make money along the way.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Can we talk now about Vladimir Putin? This is another of Putin's failures in the Metro, this story. Simon, what have you got for us?
Well, there's a sub called the Belgorod, and it is the biggest nuclear sub in the world. And so the headline says, Putin's doomsday nuclear torpedo test. And then it's got the rest of the headline, didn't go very well, which I really love. But what happened was, I think this is a propaganda story. I'm happy to believe this, but it's absolutely riddled with US intelligence reports saying, and I think this is part of... So the allegation is that the sub went out on a test to do it, which I also rather love, before the sea freezes over. So you know how cold it is up there. So off you go to do the test, but they couldn't do it because they sort of messed up. They had a technical failure.
I hear it wasn't actually meant to be a submarine. It was a boat that just went under.
With a sail, captain going down. But it's this thing about it's this idea which of course is around and is of course evidenced in Kherson and Ukraine, but it's the whole ill-trained, under-equipped Russians. So I sort of think that this is a bit the US probably floating a boat.
Is that for our benefit, or is that so the Russian populace will see this? Or
I think it's two or three things. I think it's generally building up. I mean, if you look at the stuff that's around at the moment about, Putin's being offered settlement terms or whatever,
sure.
It feels to me a little bit like it's surrounding. But I mean, I'm perfectly prepared to believe it.
Sure, yeah.
But I also think if they sent their biggest sub out, it wouldn't be because anybody got the batteries? I don't think it's going to be that really.
Yes, propaganda in a war. Surely not. That's it for part 2, but join us after the break for the female orgasm, cheating women and gambling children. And we'll have some news stories as well. See you in 3.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. There's never been a more interesting but also critical time in British politics, and I can't wait to bring you the biggest stories of the day with the best factual accuracy and also a few of my own opinions thrown in. We'll engage in passionate but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12 on TV, on radio and online.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
On the Mark Stein Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Stein Show.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
On radio,
And online.
we're proud to be
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Welcome back to Headliners with me, Mark Dolan, and the brilliant Jonathan Cogan and Simon Fanshawe. There we are, separated at birth. Look, let's now have a look at our next story, and it's The Guardian, and there's a diversity problem in children's literature. Don't ask me. I never made it past picture books, but Simon...
Well, there's picture books are mentioned, actually, but 1 in 5 children's books features characters of colour, but fiction lags behind. The thing about this is that, you know, I remember when I started came out and we started doing gay campaigning, and we're always like, we must have representatives, we want to be on TV, we must have this, we must have that. That's fine, because it's a sort of, actually, we don't want to be invisible, we kind of quite like to be there. Then what happens is, everybody says, yeah, but we've got to be nice. We've got to be nice people. We can't have any bad people who are gay on television, because actually at that point we were all either dead or sad. So it wasn't great. So we did want some nice people. But the thing that I find slightly difficult about this, working in this area, is that this is just numbers. So it'll say things like, you know, X percentage of books have now got a person of colour in them. I'm not sure how much that really tells you, because the thing that I'm really interested in is the stories that are being told. And I remember years ago, do you remember a film called Beautiful Laundrette, written by Hanif Qureshi, who wrote Buddha of Suburbia and so on? There is an Asian businessman in there who's kind of the sort of the bad guy in the film, really. And I remember once doing a Q&A interviewing Hanif Qureshi, and somebody in the audience gave him a real hard time, a younger Asian person gave him a really hard time about this negative stereotype of a character. And when it finished, Hanif just looked out at the audience and went, yeah, I just know someone like that. And it was such a perfect answer. So I absolutely understand what this is about, that you're saying, come on, everybody, don't make people invisible. But at the same time, I just wish in the story there was kind of more texture to it, really. Because what does it mean when it says the characters of colour sit on a spectrum of vague at worst to great at best, or difficult or damaging portrayals? I don't know what that means, really.
Well, I last time I read Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky, I don't remember any...
Do you notice there's something in that sentence that's particularly clever? It's a clever underboast. The last time.
Oh, read them all the
Exactly right.
Oh, yes.
That's the humble brag, isn't it?
It's the humble brag.
But I don't remember characters of colour in that book. It didn't matter. It's a universal human story. Isn't that what's important?
Well, there were none of my, fellow Jews in Harry Potter, and I love, maybe the goblins in the bank, but that's a whole other problem. We won't talk about that. But yeah, I didn't necessarily think about that when I was reading books. I didn't think, is my culture and my religion being represented here? I'm just enjoying the story. But I can also see the arguments for it as well, so...
I think you see it particularly. There's a theatre in London called the Young Vic, and it's run by somebody called Kwame Kwei Amar, who a million years ago I was in a play in London with. So that's how I know him. And he's got a really good, interesting way of doing stuff, because what his thing is all about investing in the storytellers. So the stories that then come out are all sorts. They're fascinating. But because he's black and he has an absolute kind of investment in that, it means he does commission a much broader range of people, and he's adding to that the richness of the stories that are told. So for me, that's where it needs to come from. But I understand why, to some extent, you need to pressure and say, well, it's a percentage game.
Yeah, so the...
Did you miss that? I mean, when you were a kid, though...
Yeah.
I mean, do you look back now and think, oh, actually, I sort of never saw myself in X, Y or Z, or did you?
No,
all you ever saw was Fagin?
No, and it wasn't really something I considered. But then again, I might have a different opinion if I was like an Indian kid in a predominantly white school and there were no stories by Indian kids, then I might have been like, oh, well, I'm not...
But doesn't this take us down a dangerous road, Simon, which is dictating to artists what to put in their work?
Well, to be fair, they're not doing that.
Sticking?
But I don't think it's dictating. I think the key thing is to say to people, actually, look, there's a huge range of stories here. Let's think about all the stories, because there are good black people, and bad black people, and good gay people, and bad black people.
Isn't the argument, isn't the trick to have a diversity of authors rather than the books ticking boxes?
That's exactly my point. It's how you invest in the storytellers. And it's interesting, if you look at people like Marjorie Blackman and so on, I mean, she's massively increased the range of stories that are told.
She's a genius. Well, let's get to Saturday's Metro, and one of our most important stories ever. We finally have a Pokemon master. Here's our resident nerd, Jonathan, to explain. Jonathan.
I'm through the ringer today. I mean, I wrote it, but never mind. So, Pokemon. Ash finally becomes champion after 25 years of the anime. So forget the World Cup. The real sporting event of 2022 has concluded, and Ash Ketchum, the protagonist from Pokemon, you fan?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
I believe
that's how I've been for the rest of the show.
I read this story and I thought, I've no idea.
Yeah.
No, we need some help. I believe there's a photo of the Pokemon.
Pikachu. Yeah. Well, to be fair, I didn't know who Dominic Raab was either, so that's fine. So if you
He's the one in the helm.
Yeah. So the show has run for 25 years, and barring the occasional tournament win, Ash, the protagonist, has routinely failed to achieve the goal to the point where it became a source of mockery. But now, finally, he has won the World Championship in Pokemon, and it's just fantastic. He's the best trainer there is. The only sad thing about this story is that the joyous victory was later soured as it transpired that in the building of the Pokemon Stadium, there had been thousands of human rights abuses, so really, Ash should have boycotted it. So, what can you do?
Too right. Look, we'll move swiftly on from Pokemon to spare both my and Simon's blushes. Let's go to the Daily Mail, and newsflash, children aren't great with money. Simon.
Well, a third of children fritter away, it says, their pocket money on betting, and the survey suggests.
Oh, no.
So, That's quite, I mean, in one sense, it's quite nervy. This is kids spending their own money on actual betting things. And one of the points that's made, of course, is by the anti-betting people. The UK Addiction Treatment Group says what we're seeing here is a relatively warm attitude towards gambling at a young age. And I must admit, I'm always surprised watching telly. I mean, I know it's after the watershed, but I'm always surprised by how many ads there are for gambling.
So much, so many, yeah.
There are tons, aren't there?
Well, I think it triggers your anticipatory response. If you're thinking about it, you're watching, go, oh, I could do that right now. And you get the dopamine hit, you immediately want to go and do it. That's why they're so effective. That's why you see loads of adverts for junk food or that kind of thing, just because you make that impulse decision. And with the phone and everything, you've always got it there at your fingertips. So
It's amazing. And, I mean, I found this, and it says that 1% of kids, are addicted. I don't know.
Wow.
What I don't know is how that compares with adult figures. So I don't know whether this is exceptional.
But I mean, it's not even legal for them to... I suppose that's saying like 1% of children addicted to cigarettes. They're not legally allowed to smoke it, but they've somehow gotten access to it.
But, yeah, what are these kids gambling on? I mean, they're gambling on sites that they can access.
Yeah, they're not...
And the problem is, Jonathan, that a lot of the apps that small children play with on an iPad or a tablet or on a phone, I think are a gateway to gambling. Because what they'll do is you've got abstract wins, like gold coins
or whatever,
and tokens. And I think it creates that sort of the neural pathway that gets them hooked on
Well, that's exactly what it is. It's the dopamine release. It's the, there's a chance element to it. You can open a loot box, they call it, and you get something. It is addictive. It's designed to be addictive. All these microtransactions in video games are there to kind of suck you in. But I mean, at secondary school, we used to play poker in the common room. That was friendly betting. Never went more than
what did you bet with?
Oh, money.
Oh, money?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes the teachers got involved, but then it became strip poker, so that was a little bit weird. But
and on that libelous note, let's move on to our next story. And this is in Saturday's Guardian. Rats are incredible dancers, apparently, Jonathan.
Apparently so. Slaves to the rhythm. Rats can't resist a good beat, researchers say.
There's a rat on the dance floor. What am I going to do?
Yeah, nice. Is that a song?
Yeah.
For Dubai.
Another of my ancient references that only Simon will probably recognise. There's a rat in the kitchen. What am I going to do? Do you not know that song?
No, I mean, I always assume that's a cry for help.
Don't make me sing. There's a rat in the kitchen, what am I gonna do? There's a rat in the kitchen, what am I gonna do? But what's the story here? They have natural rhythm.
They do. Apparently that is a mammalian trait, not just a human trait. So the study finds rats instinctively move in time to music, an ability previously thought to be just uniquely human. So these rats were fitted with miniature accelerometers, which is a very cute image, and played excerpts from Mozart's sonata for 2 pianos in D major. And they were shown to groove along to it. They were shown to nod in time, and they sped it up. They did like a twice as fast one, or a quarter as fast, or 75% as fast, and they nodded in time. And accordingly, the human volunteers did the exact same thing and the same changes. So they basically had the same reaction as humans to music.
That's quite good. Does it mean you can get rid of rats with playing James Blunt or something? Well, that do Ed Sheeran maybe?
Hence the Pied Piper. I think he had rhythm. He took them out of town, and that's the thing. He got the kids. He got the. Oh my God, it's wheels within wheels. Right.
I read this article and it said, study finds rats instinctively move in time to music, and I thought, I've been out with a few men like that, so that's fine. But what I've never understood about this thing about moving in time to the music is, how do people who can't do that, how do people dance out of time?
Tell us, Mark.
Yeah, it's it is a rare skill.
It's an absolute art, isn't it? I don't know, maybe both of you...
Growing up in England definitely helps.
Yeah.
I watch them and I think that is genius to resist it, because I can't.
But you know the famous Elton John song, Benny and the Jets?
I do know the famous.
And the genius, everyone's a genius, but the brilliant producer who's no longer with us, Gus Dudgeon, Elton John's iconic producer, he decided to put the audience sound effect onto that record because it sounds like a live performance, doesn't it? And he said that he used an American sound effect at first, an American crowd, and then it didn't work because he said they're clapping in correct rhythm. And he said British audiences don't clap in correct rhythm. So he found a recording of a different concert that was in the UK. And I think it was, he's that legendary guitar player, the Hendrix. Took an audience from Hendrix in Britain, slightly off the beats. And he's like, yeah, that sounds British.
It's that kind of jazz mentality.
Yeah, that's it.
Kind of Keanu Reeves.
So if you listen
style.
to Benny and the Jets, the clapping is authentic, it's real, and it's a bit out of rhythm.
It's got that kind of drunk sway to it. Like
a little bit. Okay. Yeah, exactly. Drunk on Foster's Lager. Let's now go to Saturday's Times. And good news for adulterers out there. Simon!
affairs can put a spring in your step if you're a woman. This is one of these studies that you just think... This comes from the school of the blindingly obvious, it seems to me. The interesting thing is that when men suffer after committing adultery, but strikingly women who cheated were found not only to recover but even surpass their initial levels of well-being. But as it goes through, there are two things that it says. One is it says, the study concludes that infidelity is often the outcome of years of relationship unhappiness. No kidding. Are you really serious? And there's another one later on where they talk about, well, it's after rather than, it's before rather than after. But what is quite interesting is that women, apparently, the study speculates that for such women, an affair may serve as a wake-up call for their partners. So what you do is you go in and you say to your partner, so sorry, darling, but you're so ghastly and I'm so unhappy. I've had an affair with Joe the plumber. And your boyfriend goes, oh, that's fantastic. Right, what movie should we go out to eat? Let's go out to eat.
Oh, my God.
I find that incredible, but then I'm not an expert on this.
No, I feel like they'd have the conversation before I got to that point. I mean, it does seem quite an extreme wake-up call. It's not the nicest way. And it said men don't enjoy it. Men feel terrible afterwards, and I can relate to that. Once it's done, you don't feel good. But yeah, it's...
Have you ever cheated on a partner?
No, never.
Although you've tried desperately, I believe.
Oh, anyone, somebody. No.
I never have either. I'm hopelessly monogamous. I mean, I'm emotionally committed to monogamy.
When I was a young whippersnapper at college, I was really careful who I kissed, because if I kissed them, in my head, it's like, we've got to go out with each other for about a year. So I got very choosy.
Oh, how sweet.
I know. Well, it's a Catholic upbringing for you.
Yeah, I'm glad you don't live in France. I'd kiss you goodnight. I won't do that.
Too right.
Does a kiss on the cheek count? A manly kiss on the cheek?
Depends which cheek. Now, let's move on to
talking of the lift.
Onto the Daily Mail. You've paid for it. Let's show it to the world. The Daily Mail now. And how can we help women reach orgasm? Jonathan, you've told me you once held hands with a woman. What's the secret?
I think we can all agree that it's a myth. It's a myth. Like the lost city of Atlantis or the fact that masks stop COVID. It's very real, I think. I've read. So apparently evening primrose oil may help women orgasm, study claims. So it's typically been taken by menopausal women who are trying to deal with hot flushes, there's a vest for that, while they sleep. But experts claim evening primrose oil could actually heat up the nights of women yet to go through the change by improving their orgasms. That sounds like good news. It can sort of relieve quite tension and stress. And basically, what does it do? It has a hormone-like effect, which helps contract the smooth muscles in the reproductive system. I'm very aroused right now, and that's what it does. It kind of just loosens you up, and it gives you better jollies.
I mean, seriously, Dr. Hilary Jones, eat your heart out.
Exactly.
Yeah, this is the GB News medic with no qualifications. Very on brand.
I think he's had some qualification.
Simon, have you taken any tinctures to enhance the sexual experience?
I have to say, I love women, but I have to say, when it comes to having sex with them, I am frankly a conscientious objector. I am a wearer of the white poppy.
That will do it. Can I say it's been an absolute thrill to have Jonathan Cogan and Simon Fanshawe with me. Thank you, chaps. Do come back again soon. Headliners returns tomorrow in the wise and hilarious company of Steve N. Allen, and I'm back tomorrow at 8 for Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In. See you then.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.